Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. Rosa Parks has just been arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus for a white passenger. The same year in the UK, a branch of a local trade union in Bristol is quietly passing a ban on black and Asian people working on buses. This was post-war Britain. Tens of thousands of immigrants had come over from the Caribbean, from Pakistan and India to help rebuild the country and the economy. But by the late 50s, early 60s, racial tensions in communities across the UK were beginning to rise, particularly in the workplace. It was felt most acutely by some here in Bristol on the buses. Black and Asian people were allowed to travel alongside white people on the buses, but they weren't allowed to be drivers or conductors.
What would you think about coloured people coming to work on the buses?
I don't like the idea very much.
Why not?
I wouldn't like to work with them at night.
We don't want them at all. No, they cause too much trouble as it is. We don't want them.
What sort of trouble do they cause?
Well, I mean to say, we should all be out of work if they start coming on. They'll start ruling the country before long, won't they?
The picture across the country was a fear of newcomers, of black people living next door to them, taking their jobs, going out with their daughters. Not everyone, but there was obviously that element of fear of the unknown.
I'm off to meet three men who refuse to just stand by and accept the blatant racism. Together, they helped change Britain forever. Hi, Roy.
Good morning.
Hello.
How are you?
Are you ready?
Yes.
Your bus awaits you.
Okay.
Roy Hackett had recently arrived by boat from Jamaica. He had £5 in his pocket and was in search of a better life. What was it like? What were people's attitudes to you?
They were not welcoming. In the doors there were placards in the door. No Irish, no gypsies, no black, no dogs.
Roy's then wife wanted to be a bus conductress. She went for an interview, but bosses at the Bristol Omnibus Company took one look at her and said the position had been filled. It was re-advertised the next day. Roy had a job at a construction firm and was a paying member of the Transport and General Workers Union, the very union that was upholding the colour bar.
At one hand, they were helping me to get into the union and the job. And on the other hand, my wife asked for a job and they stopped her getting the job. And that makes me very hungry and disappointed as well.
Hello, Paul. The news reached a youth worker who'd just arrived in Bristol. Fresh from national service in the RAF, Paul Stevenson was inspired by the civil rights movement in the US and decided he needed to out the colour bar for what it was, racist and unjust. He met an 18-year-old called Guy Bailey at his youth centre and they got plotting.
Guy Bailey was quite prepared to go and be interviewed and was expecting not to get a job because I told him that it was likely he wouldn't get a job on the buses, but it would give me the ammunition to expose it openly.
So the plan was in place. Guy Bailey was a dream candidate. He'd headed up his local boys' brigade and was a part-time student. He donned his smartest suit and went along for interview. Hello, Guy.
She said to the manager that 2 o'clock appointment is here, something to that effect, but he's black. And the manager said, tell him that we have no vacancies, all vacancies are filled. When the question was asked, the manager says we don't employ blacks.
And that started the boycott. Members of the West Indian community, together with students and other white supporters, refused to board the buses. But the union and the state-owned bus company wouldn't budge. After all, what they were doing was perfectly legal.
If we did start engaging coloured people, while we can still get white people, that a lot of these white females would be leaving the job to go to other work in the city.
Then, on the 28th of August 1963, there was a breakthrough.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
On the same day Martin Luther King took to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington to make that historic speech, the Bristol Omnibus Company finally agreed to employ black and Asian staff on its buses. The campaign, backed by future Prime Minister Harold Wilson, paved the way for legislation outlawing racism.
A shopkeeper or a bartender can't refuse to serve a man because of his colour. Some people believe that the government should go much further, that it should be made illegal to deny a man a job.
The real test is going to be, of course, when the first West Indian takes his job on the bus.
Yes, well, I think this is going to be all right. I'm quite confident that whoever goes on, if he finds that he's suitable, that he will demonstrate by his own ability, and I think that he'll get on very well with the bus crews, and all should be quite all right.
I become the first driver, black driver, I should say.
British Olympian Vernon Samuels says his father, who passed away earlier this year, didn't have such a smooth ride to begin with.
It's amazing when I used to hear him recount those stories of driving a route, and sometimes nobody would get on the bus because they would see a black man driving behind the wheel and they literally physically wouldn't get on the bus. There was a real resistance from both passengers and indeed some of his colleagues as white colleagues.
Keep on, mate, keep it going.
For today's aspiring bus drivers, Paul Stevenson's words do ring true.
I thank God that they did go through those things and kind of broke down those barriers. But now, for me and a lot of drivers here, race isn't a problem. We look at each other as human beings, and that's what I think the most important thing is.
But Nick says whilst he found it easy to become a trainee bus driver, his dream of becoming a pilot has been much harder because of the colour of his skin.
The armed forces, I was thinking about joining the Air Force, and when I was in the Air Cadets, there was a lot of racism. The cultures are different, but I just think there was a lot of I would say mainly culture difference. So you wouldn't really fit in.
Today's trade union leadership has apologised for the colour ban, calling it completely unacceptable, and they're still keen to make amends.
This is the training room that the regions made the decision to dedicate this room to Mr. Hackett, Mr. Bailey and Mr. Stevenson.
Lawrence Faircloth heads up Unite in the southwest and says he's horrified by what happened.
Every week was a 6-day week, and they honestly believed that more labour coming in to the buses would have reduced that down to 5. Which would reduce their earnings, which wasn't great earnings at the time.
How does the union sort of justify it? I mean, how is it ever possible?
Well, I don't think we can justify it. I can't justify what happened that long ago. I can say that that could not, hopefully, ever happen again.
What Rosa Parks was highlighting was that there was going to be a fight back by black people.
Future activists need look no further than Paul Stevenson or his inspiration Rosa Parks for lessons in how to take a stand against injustice.
She was saying it loud and clear, I'm not going to tolerate racism. In this country, there was a feeling that it's the way of life. The English took for granted that the black people are an inferior race. And she was saying no to that, and I liked that.
One thing I know for sure is that 50 years ago we couldn't be standing here. We wouldn't have been allowed to come here.
I said to my daughters that things that we have done 50 years ago to change the culture in this town and also the whole of the country, they laugh at me. They said, Daddy, it will change, it will come. I said, no, it will never come unless we start, not without me or who started it. I'm trying to tell them that unless they fight for their own right as a human being, they'll never change culture.